You're standing in the snow-covered courtyard of Gyeongbokgung Palace in Seoul. The year is 1592, and the morning air cuts through your thin silk robes like a blade. Your breath forms small clouds as you hurry across the frozen stones, your soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the ancient pathways. At 12 years old, you should be playing with wooden toys or learning to read classical Chinese characters with your village tutor. Instead, you're clutching a jade ornament to your chest, preparing to serve tea to men whose single word could end your life. But you're not just any servant in the Korean royal court. You're a gongbok, a boy eunuch whose childhood was stolen not by war or famine, but by a knife and the twisted demands of palace politics. The ornament in your hands once belonged to a boy just like you who served in these same halls until he disappeared one winter night. No one speaks his name anymore. No one dares ask what happened to him. In the hermit kingdom of Joseon, Korea, boys like you exist in the shadows between male and female, between human and property, between life and a kind of living death that makes you long for the village you'll never see again. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. Please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. What you're about to hear isn't just another tale of royal excess from a distant kingdom. It's the story of a systematic practice that consumed thousands of Korean boys across 5 centuries, transforming them into living ghosts who served the most isolated royal court in East Asia. These weren't just servants, they were sacrificial offerings to a system that demanded absolute purity, total control, and the complete erasure of masculine identity in service to royal women who were themselves prisoners of palace walls. The practice of creating boy eunuchs in Korea began during the early Joseon dynasty, but it wasn't born from Korean traditions. Like so many aspects of Korean court culture, it arrived as a diplomatic necessity, a way to prove submission to the Chinese imperial court while maintaining the appearance of civilized governance. When Korean embassies visited Beijing, they brought tribute that included young eunuchs as gifts for the Chinese emperor. But what started as foreign diplomacy quickly became domestic policy. The Korean royal court, isolated on a peninsula surrounded by hostile neighbors and vast oceans, developed its own twisted interpretation of Chinese palace customs, where Chinese eunuchs often wielded considerable political power and could rise to positions of great influence. Korean gongbok remained forever trapped in the lower rungs of palace hierarchy. They were created not to govern, but to serve. Not to influence, but to disappear. The selection process was as methodical as it was cruel. Royal agents would travel to remote villages throughout the peninsula, searching for boys who met specific criteria. They needed to be young, usually between 8 and 12 years old, to ensure the physical transformation would be complete. They needed to be beautiful, with delicate features that would remain pleasing after their masculine characteristics were surgically removed. Most importantly, they needed to be expendable. Poverty made boys expendable. Families drowning in debt to local landlords would sometimes offer their sons as payment. Others faced the impossible choice between watching their entire family starve or sacrificing one child to feed the rest. The royal agents carried silver coins and official documents that promised compensation, but they also carried the implicit threat of royal displeasure for those who refused their offers. Imagine your parents' faces when the men in silk robes arrive at your family's humble farmhouse. Your father, a rice farmer whose back is bent from decades of labor, listens as they explain their purpose. Your mother, who has sewn your clothes from scraps of fabric and sung you to sleep every night of your short life, cannot meet your eyes as the negotiation begins. They speak of honor, how serving in the royal palace will elevate your family's status. They mention the silver coins that could buy seed for next year's planting or medicine for your sick grandmother. But you're old enough to understand the subtext. You've heard whispers about boys who went to the palace and never returned. Village elders speak in hushed tones about the knife that makes boys into something else, something that can serve royal women without threatening their virtue or challenging male authority. You don't fully comprehend what this means, but you understand enough to feel terror creeping up your spine like ice water. The journey to Seoul takes weeks, traveling in covered wagons with other selected boys from villages across the kingdom. Some cry constantly, calling for mothers who cannot hear them. Others sit in stunned silence, staring at the passing landscape with the hollow eyes of children who have already begun to die inside. A few, the ones who break your heart the most, actually seem excited, still believing the lies about honor and advancement that the agents told their families. You learn their names during the long journey. There's Minho, whose father sold him to pay gambling debts. Jun Seo, whose entire village was threatened with military conscription unless they provided tribute boys. Hyun Woo, barely 8 years old, who still asks when he can go home to help his mother with the harvest. Each night you huddle together for warmth in whatever shelter the guards provide, sharing stories about your former lives and dreams about what awaits in the capital. The guards who escort you are themselves products of the palace system. Older eunuchs whose own boyhood transformations have left them emotionally hollow. They show no cruelty, but also no kindness. They feed you adequately, tend to minor injuries, and answer practical questions about when you'll reach the next village. But when younger boys ask about their families or beg to return home, the guards simply stare through them as if they've become invisible. Seoul, when you finally see it, is larger than your imagination could have contained. The city sprawls across valleys and hills, with tile-roofed houses stretching beyond the horizon. Smoke rises from countless chimneys, and the streets teem with people wearing clothes finer than anything you've ever seen. Merchants hawk goods from distant provinces while scholars in white robes hurry past, their top knots marking their educated status. But all of this fades to insignificance when you see the palace walls rising before you, like mountains made of stone and tile. Gyeongbokgung Palace is a city within a city, its walls so high they block out the sun and cast everything in perpetual shadow. Guard towers punctuate the walls at regular intervals, each one manned by soldiers whose job is to keep people in as much as to keep intruders out. The palace gates are works of art. Elaborate wooden structures painted in brilliant colors and decorated with dragons, phoenixes, and other mythical creatures. But as your wagon passes through them, you realize you're crossing a threshold from which there is no return. The gates close behind you with a sound like thunder, and suddenly the outside world might as well be on the moon. Inside the palace walls, everything is different. The air itself feels heavier, weighted with centuries of secrets and suffering. Servants move with the careful precision of people who know that a single mistake could mean death. Even the birds seem quieter here, as if they understand the need for absolute discretion in a place where emperors' whispers can topple kingdoms. You're taken to a compound within the larger palace complex, a series of low buildings surrounding a central courtyard where other boys like you wait in small groups. Some have obviously been here for months or even years. Their hair is styled in the manner of palace servants. Their clothing is uniform silk robes, and their movements have the careful control of people who have learned to make themselves invisible. But it's their eyes that tell the real story. The light that should shine in children's eyes, the curiosity, the mischief, the innocent joy and simple pleasures, has been extinguished. They look at you and the other new arrivals with a mixture of pity and recognition. They remember being where you are now, and they know what's coming next. The compound is managed by older eunuchs who have survived decades of palace service. These men, now in their 40s and 50s, move with the graceful efficiency of dancers, but their faces are masks that reveal nothing. They explain the rules in voices pitched higher than nature intended, their words precise and emotionless. You will wake at dawn when the first bell sounds. You will bathe in cold water and dress in the robes provided. You will eat exactly what is given to you, nothing more, nothing less. You will speak only when spoken to, and then only to answer direct questions. You will never make eye contact with anyone of higher rank, which includes virtually everyone in the palace complex. Most importantly, you will prepare yourself for the procedure that will transform you from a boy into a gongbok. This preparation involves both physical and mental conditioning, designed to increase your chances of surviving what many boys do not survive. The physical preparation is systematic and humiliating. Palace physicians examine every inch of your body, noting your health, checking for hidden injuries or illnesses that might complicate the surgery. They measure your height and weight, test your reflexes, and evaluate your pain tolerance through methods that leave you sobbing and bruised. But the mental preparation is worse. Older eunuchs describe what will happen to you in clinical detail, explaining exactly what will be cut away and how your body will change afterward. They tell you about the pain, how it will feel like fire consuming your entire being, how you will beg for death before the healing begins. They describe the weeks of recovery when infection could kill you at any moment, when fever dreams will blur the line between consciousness and madness. They also explain what your new life will be like. You will serve in the women's quarters of the palace, attending to queens, concubines, and princesses who exist in almost complete isolation from the outside world. You will dress them, bathe them, style their hair, and listen to their secrets. You will be trusted with intimate knowledge that could topple dynasties, but you will never be allowed to act on that knowledge or even acknowledge that you possess it. Most devastatingly, they explain that you will cease to exist as a person in any meaningful sense. Your name will be changed to something more suitable for a palace servant. Your past will be forgotten. Officially, you never had a family or life before entering palace service. Your future will be entirely dependent on the whims of your superiors, who can have you punished, transferred, or eliminated for reasons you will never be told. During these weeks of preparation, you watch as boys ahead of you in the process undergo their transformations. They disappear into the medical quarters one morning, and either emerge weeks later as hollow-eyed gongbok, or they don't emerge at all. No one speaks about the ones who don't survive. Their belongings are simply removed, their sleeping mats rolled up and taken away as if they never existed. The waiting is perhaps the cruelest part. Each morning, you wonder if today will be your turn. Each night, you lie awake listening to the soft sobbing of other boys who are facing the same uncertainty. Some pray to Buddhist bodhisattvas for strength or mercy. Others whisper the names of family members they fear they'll forget if they don't repeat them constantly. A few simply stare at the ceiling until dawn, having moved beyond prayer or remembrance into a kind of emotional numbness that serves as protection against unbearable reality. The night before your procedure, sleep becomes impossible. Your body knows what's coming, even if your mind tries to reject the reality. You lie on your thin sleeping mat, listening to the palace settling around you like some enormous sleeping beast. The wooden beams creak with temperature changes, distant footsteps echo through corridors you've never seen, and occasionally you hear sounds that might be crying or might just be the wind through the courtyards. Minho, the boy whose father sold him for gambling debts, whispers to you in the darkness. His voice carries the tremor of someone trying to be brave while falling apart inside. Do you think it hurts as much as they say? You don't answer because there's no comfort in honesty and no honor in lies. Instead, you reach over and squeeze his hand, a small gesture of human connection in a place designed to strip away everything human about you. The procedure itself takes place in a chamber deep within the palace medical quarters, a room that smells of herbs, burning incense, and something metallic that makes your stomach turn. The walls are lined with ceramic jars containing powders and liquids whose purposes you don't want to contemplate. Surgical instruments gleam on silk-covered tables, knives so sharp they seem to cut the air itself, clamps and needles that look more like torture devices than healing tools. The physician who performs these transformations is a man named Dr. Yi, though the other palace staff refer to him only as the Knife Master. He's perhaps 50 years old with hands steady as stone and eyes that have seen too much suffering to register compassion anymore. He's been castrating boys for the palace for over 20 years, and his technique has been refined through hundreds of procedures. Some say he once showed mercy to a boy who begged to keep his manhood, allowing him to escape. Others claim he's never shown emotion of any kind, treating each procedure like a carpenter treats the cutting of wood. When your turn comes, the guards who escort you to the chamber are gentle, not from kindness, but from practiced efficiency. They know that struggling only makes everything worse for everyone involved. The room is kept deliberately warm to prevent shock, and the air is thick with smoke from burning herbs meant to prevent infection and dull pain. Dr. Yi examines you one final time, his fingers probing and measuring with clinical detachment. He explains the procedure in a voice devoid of emotion, describing how the blade will cut, what will be removed, and how the wound will be sealed. He mentions that some boys pass out from pain, while others remain conscious throughout. Both responses are normal, he says, as if discussing the weather. The restraints are silk cords, soft against your skin, but unbreakable. They secure your wrists and ankles to prevent movement that could make the cuts less precise. A wooden block is placed between your teeth, not just to muffle screams, but to prevent you from biting through your tongue in agony. The first cut is unlike any pain you've ever imagined. It's not just physical sensation, but the psychological horror of feeling parts of yourself being severed and removed. Your vision goes white, then black, then fills with colors that don't exist in nature. Every nerve in your body screams in protest while your mind tries to escape into unconsciousness. But consciousness won't release you. You feel everything. The blade separating flesh, the blood flowing warm down your thighs, the cauterizing tools sealing wounds with heat that feels like lightning. Dr. Yi works with mechanical precision, his movements economical and sure. He's performed this operation so many times that your agony is simply background noise to his concentration. The removal is complete within minutes, though it feels like hours. What made you male, what connected you to your father and his father before him, lies in a ceramic bowl beside the table. Dr. Yi examines his work with satisfaction, checking for bleeding and ensuring the wounds are properly sealed. He inserts a small metal tube to keep the urethral opening clear during healing, a detail that will determine whether you survive the next few weeks. Recovery takes place in a special ward where other newly castrated boys lie in various stages of healing. The smell is overwhelming: blood, infection, medicinal herbs, and the particular odor of bodies fighting to repair catastrophic damage. Some boys moan constantly from pain that no amount of opium can fully dull. Others lie in feverish delirium, calling out to mothers who will never answer. The first week is when most deaths occur. Infection sets in quickly in wounds that refuse to heal properly. Fever spikes so high that boys sometimes die from the heat consuming their brains. Others bleed internally, their life seeping away despite Dr. Yi's careful stitching. The lucky ones simply slip away in their sleep, escaping into death before the full horror of their new existence can take hold. You survive, though there are moments when you wish you hadn't. The pain is constant and all-consuming, radiating from the surgical site through your entire body. Simple functions like urinating become exercises in agony that leave you sobbing and shaking. The metal tube creates its own problems. Infections that require daily cleaning with solutions that burn like liquid fire. But perhaps worse than the physical pain is the psychological realization of what you've lost. Looking down at your bandaged groin, you understand that your connection to normal human life has been severed as completely as the flesh that once defined your gender. You will never father children, never know the intimate love between man and woman, never feel the simple masculine pride that comes from strength and virility. The palace staff who tend to recovering boys show the same emotional emptiness as everyone else in this place. They change bandages, administer medicines, and remove bodies with equal efficiency. When fever takes Minho on the 8th day, his body is wrapped in white cloth and carried away before his sleeping mat has cooled. No prayers are said, no mourning period observed. He simply ceases to exist, as if the procedure had finally claimed what little remained of his humanity. As your body heals, your training as a gongbok begins in earnest. This isn't just about learning to serve, it's about learning to exist in a state of perpetual invisibility while being constantly observed. Palace life operates according to rules so complex and arbitrary that a single mistake can mean death, yet these rules are never written down or explicitly explained. You must learn through observation, mimicry, and the painful consequences of error. The first lesson is movement. Gongbok must glide rather than walk, their footsteps silent as whispers on marble floors. You spend hours practicing this unnatural gait, balancing books on your head while senior eunuchs criticize every sound you make. Your natural boyish energy must be completely suppressed, replaced by the flowing grace expected of those who serve royal women. Voice training is equally important. The surgery has changed more than your anatomy. It's altered the way your vocal cords will develop. But this natural change isn't enough. You must learn to speak in the high musical tones that mark palace eunuchs, eliminating any trace of masculine roughness from your speech. Hours each day are spent practicing scales like a singer, but the song you're learning to perform is your own erasure. Most challenging of all is learning to think like furniture. Gongbok must be present but invisible, hearing everything but remembering nothing, witnessing intimate moments while maintaining absolute discretion. You practice standing motionless for hours, learning to regulate your breathing so quietly that people forget you're in the room. You train your eyes to look without seeing, your ears to hear without listening, your mind to know without understanding. The women's quarters, where you will eventually serve, exist behind multiple layers of walls, guards, and protocol. These are the most isolated human beings in Korea. Queens, concubines, and princesses who live their entire lives within a few dozen rooms, never seeing the outside world except through windows high above their reach. They are prisoners of their own exalted status, and you are being trained to be their keeper and companion in this gilded captivity. Your new identity begins with a new name. The boy who came from a farming village no longer exists. That person died on Dr. Yi's table. You are now called Jade Flower, a name chosen for its feminine beauty and complete disconnection from your masculine past. When senior eunuchs address you, they expect you to respond to this name as if you've carried it since birth. Any hesitation or confusion is met with swift punishment. The punishment system in the palace is designed to break spirits rather than bodies. Physical beatings are rare because damaged servants are less useful. Instead, punishments focus on humiliation and psychological pressure. A gongbok who displeases his superiors might be forced to kneel motionless in courtyards for hours, while other servants walk past without acknowledgement. Or he might have his food privileges reduced until hunger makes concentration impossible. The cruelest punishment is temporary banishment from the women's quarters, being sent to work in the palace kitchens or gardens where your specialized training is useless and your status plummets. As winter deepens and your physical healing continues, you begin to understand the true genius of the gongbok system. It's not just about creating safe servants for royal women. It's about manufacturing the perfect victims. Boys who have been castrated lose more than their manhood. They lose their connection to normal human society. They cannot return to their villages because their families would be ashamed of what they've become. They cannot marry or have children, eliminating the basic motivations that drive most human behavior. They exist in a liminal state between male and female, child and adult, human and object. This liminal existence makes gongbok absolutely dependent on palace favor for survival. They have no outside support system, no alternative means of supporting themselves, no identity beyond their service role. This dependence ensures absolute loyalty, not from love or respect, but from the simple understanding that betraying the palace means death by starvation or exposure. The older eunuchs who train you have survived decades in this system, and their survival has required the complete suppression of normal human emotions. They show no affection for the boys they train, no anger at the system that created them, no hope for anything beyond their current existence. They have become what you are becoming, living ghosts who perform their duties with mechanical precision, while their souls slowly disintegrate. Jun Seo, the boy from the threatened village, doesn't survive his transformation in the way that matters. His body heals properly, his voice develops the proper tone, and his movements achieve the required grace. But something essential inside him simply stops functioning. He performs his duties flawlessly but shows no recognition when you speak his name, no response to kindness or cruelty. He has achieved perfect invisibility by becoming invisible even to himself. Watching Jun Seo's psychological death, you realize that survival in the palace requires walking a narrow line between complete surrender and total resistance. Surrender too completely, and you lose everything that makes you human. Resist too obviously, and you face punishment that will break you anyway. The only hope lies in finding some small part of yourself that you can hide away, protect from the system's hunger for complete possession of your identity. As the weeks turn to months, Your education in palace life reveals layers of complexity that make your village upbringing seem impossibly simple. The women's quarters operate according to a hierarchy so intricate that a single misplaced gesture can trigger consequences rippling through the entire compound. At the apex sit the queens, women whose power is absolute within these walls, yet completely meaningless beyond them. Below them, royal concubines navigate treacherous political waters where favor can shift like morning mist. Princesses born into captivity more complete than any prison exist in a strange twilight between privilege and powerlessness. Your first assignment comes in early spring, when the cherry blossoms bloom like snow against the palace walls. Lady Consort Min, a woman barely older than your own sister would be now, has requested additional attendance for her morning rituals. The senior eunuchs select you not for any particular skill, but because your youth makes you less threatening to established power structures within her household. Lady Min's chambers occupy an entire wing of the women's quarters. Rooms so opulent they seem designed to compensate for their occupants' invisible chains. Silk wallpaper depicts scenes of mountain landscapes she will never visit, while jade sculptures represent animals she will never see in their natural state. The irony is lost on no one. Surrounded by images of freedom while living in the most constrained existence imaginable, the consort herself presents a study in contradictions that you learn to read like a survival manual. At 23, she possesses the kind of ethereal beauty that painters spend lifetimes trying to capture, but her eyes hold depths of sadness that seem to have no bottom. Her voice, when she speaks at all, carries the musical quality that marks women of the highest breeding, yet underneath lies something harder. The steel that develops in people who have learned that kindness can be weaponized against them. Lady Min's daily routine reveals the suffocating nature of royal women's lives. She wakes at dawn not by choice, but by imperial decree that regulates even the sleep cycles of those who serve the throne. Her morning ablutions require an hour of careful preparation, bathing in water heated to precise temperatures, applying cosmetics according to court fashion that hasn't changed in centuries, arranging her hair in styles so complex they require architectural planning. You stand motionless in the corner during these rituals, learning to become part of the furniture while observing everything. The way Lady Min's hands tremble slightly when applying rouge to her cheeks, betraying anxiety that her composed expression never reveals. How she pauses before certain mirrors as if trying to recognize the woman reflected there. The manner in which she speaks to her older female attendants, respectful but distant, maintaining barriers even with those who dress her naked body each morning. The other gongbok in Lady Min's service have developed their own methods of psychological survival. Moonshadow, castrated 5 years ago at age 10, has perfected the art of selective deafness, hearing commands directed at him while allowing conversations to flow around him like water around stone. His face maintains pleasant emptiness while his mind retreats to some internal sanctuary that palace life cannot penetrate. Silverbell, older and more experienced, has chosen a different path. He remembers everything, every slight, every kindness, every secret whispered in moments of vulnerability. His memory has become his power, allowing him to anticipate needs and prevent disasters through careful manipulation of information. But this hypervigilance has cost him the ability to sleep deeply or trust completely, leaving him in a state of permanent alertness that ages him beyond his years. The newest member of the household is a boy called Autumn Leaves, recently recovered from his own transformation. His wounds are still tender, both physical and psychological, making him jump at sudden sounds and flinch when people move too quickly. You recognize yourself in his haunted expression, remembering your own early days when every shadow seemed to hide fresh horrors and every kindness felt like a trap waiting to spring. Lady Min herself seems aware of the delicate ecosystem of suffering that surrounds her, though she rarely acknowledges it directly. Sometimes, late at night when palace protocol relaxes slightly, she will speak to her gongbok in tones approaching normal human conversation. These moments feel like gifts, brief returns to a world where people can express genuine thoughts and emotions without calculating the political implications of every word. During one such evening, as you help arrange her evening reading materials, Lady Min breaks the usual silence with an unexpected question. Do you remember your mother's face? The inquiry hangs in the air like incense smoke, dangerous in its intimacy. Palace rules forbid servants from discussing their past lives, but the consort's rank gives her certain privileges in private conversation. You consider lying, claiming that palace service has erased all memories of your previous existence. This would be the safe response, the one that acknowledges your complete transformation into a palace object. But something in Lady Min's tone suggests she needs honesty more than safety. Sometimes, you whisper, but it gets harder each day. She nods slowly, her fingers absently stroking a silk scroll containing poetry she will never be allowed to publish. I dream about my grandmother's garden, she admits, her voice so soft you strain to hear. She grew peonies that bloomed like small suns. I used to help her water them before dawn, when the dew made everything look like it was covered in diamonds. Her eyes focus on something beyond the painted silk walls. I wake up expecting to smell earth and flowers, but there's only incense and perfume. These conversations become precious to you, moments when the machinery of palace life pauses long enough to allow genuine human connection. Lady Min shares fragments of her imprisoned dreams while you offer carefully edited memories of village life that won't trigger palace security concerns. Through these exchanges, you begin to understand that everyone in the women's quarters is performing elaborate theater designed to mask the fundamental tragedy of their existence. The seasonal rhythm of palace life provides its own form of psychological torture. Spring brings cherry blossoms that the royal women can observe only through windows, their beauty made more poignant by its inaccessibility. Summer heat creates stifling conditions in rooms that cannot be properly ventilated without compromising security. Autumn leaves fall in courtyards that might as well be on distant planets, while winter snow covers a world that exists only in memory and imagination. Each season also brings its cycle of ceremonies and rituals designed to demonstrate the royal family's connection to natural cycles they no longer experience directly. During the spring fertility festivals, the queen performs elaborate rites celebrating the renewal of life while surrounded by castrated servants who embody the deliberate prevention of natural generation. The irony is lost on no one, but acknowledging it would mean death for anyone below royal rank. Your role in these ceremonies gradually expands as senior eunuchs recognize your ability to perform duties without drawing attention to yourself. You learn to arrange flowers in patterns that symbolize cosmic harmony, to prepare tea that captures the essence of seasons you're forbidden to experience, to burn incense that creates atmospheric moods appropriate to rituals you don't understand but must execute perfectly. The flower arranging becomes a particular specialty, perhaps because it allows you to work with living things in an environment dominated by artificial beauty. Under the tutelage of Master Chrysanthemum, a eunuch who has served the palace for 30 years, you learn that each bloom carries symbolic weight that can accidentally convey messages ranging from romantic devotion to political rebellion. A chrysanthemum placed at the wrong angle might suggest criticism of imperial policy, while roses arranged in certain patterns could be interpreted as communications with enemies outside the palace walls. Master Chrysanthemum's instruction extends beyond mere technique to encompass the philosophical principles underlying palace aesthetics. Beauty, he explains while demonstrating the proper way to trim bamboo stems, must serve power, never challenge it. Every arrangement you create should enhance the harmony of imperial rule, never suggest alternatives or improvements. His fingers work with surgical precision, each cut deliberate and irreversible. Like us, he adds quietly, flowers are most beautiful when they can no longer reproduce. The parallel between castrated servants and cut flowers becomes a recurring theme in your education. Both are appreciated for their beauty. Both are prevented from fulfilling their natural biological functions, and both are discarded when they no longer serve their decorative purposes. The metaphor is simultaneously profound and deeply disturbing, capturing the essential tragedy of palace life in a single image. As your first year of service progresses, you witness the casual cruelty that underlies even the most refined aspects of court culture. When Silverbell accidentally spills tea during an important ceremony, his punishment involves kneeling motionless in the courtyard for 3 days without food or water. His crime wasn't the spill itself. Accidents happen even to experienced servants, but his momentary expression of frustration when it occurred. The flash of genuine human emotion across his face violated the cardinal rule of palace service. Gongbok must never reveal their inner lives. Watching Silverbell's punishment, you understand that the palace system requires not just obedience, but the complete performance of contentment with your degraded status. You must not only serve, but appear grateful for the opportunity to serve. Any sign of resentment, homesickness, or desire for a different existence becomes evidence of insufficient loyalty to imperial authority. The psychological pressure of maintaining this performance affects different gongbok in different ways. Some achieve a kind of Zen-like detachment, floating through their duties in a meditative state that borders on catatonia. Others develop elaborate internal fantasy lives that allow them to escape mentally while their bodies perform required tasks. A few, like Master Chrysanthemum, find genuine satisfaction in perfecting their skills, transforming service into art as a way of maintaining dignity within degradation. But the most disturbing adaptation you witness is the development of genuine love for the system that has destroyed them. Some long-serving eunuchs speak of palace life with the fervor of religious converts, describing their castration as liberation from the animal desires that compromise masculine judgment. They claim to find fulfillment in their sexless existence, arguing that freedom from reproductive urges allows them to achieve spiritual purity impossible for complete men. Whether this represents genuine enlightenment or sophisticated psychological defense mechanisms remains unclear, but the passion of these converts makes them valuable to palace administrators. They become enthusiastic recruiters, visiting villages to identify promising candidates for future transformation. Their testimony about the benefits of eunuch service provides moral cover for a system that might otherwise seem purely exploitative. These recruiting missions reveal another layer of the palace's systematic approach to creating gongbok. Rather than simply purchasing boys from desperate families, the administration has developed sophisticated techniques for identifying children who will adapt successfully to castration and service. They look for specific psychological profiles: boys who are intelligent but not rebellious, beautiful but not vain, sensitive but not fragile. The selection criteria also include family background investigations designed to ensure that chosen boys have no significant connections that might motivate rescue attempts or revenge seeking. Orphans are preferred, followed by children from families so impoverished that losing a son represents economic relief rather than emotional tragedy. Boys with strong father figures or close relationships with siblings are generally avoided, unless other factors make them exceptionally desirable candidates. This systematic approach to recruitment reflects the palace's understanding that creating effective gongbok requires more than surgical modification. The psychological transformation from boy to sexless servant depends on carefully orchestrated experiences of powerlessness, isolation, and dependency that begin long before the actual castration occurs. The journey to Seoul, the weeks of preparation, and the recovery period all serve to break down existing identity structures and prepare candidates for reconstruction as palace property. Your own psychological adaptation follows patterns you recognize in other gongbok, though each person's journey contains unique elements shaped by individual temperament and experience. The initial phase involves desperate attempts to maintain connections to your previous identity, secretly practicing your birth name, trying to remember your mother's lullabies, holding on to small details about village life that seem important enough to preserve. But palace life systematically erodes these connections through daily routines that reinforce your new identity. Every time someone addresses you as Jade Flower, every mirror that reflects your increasingly feminized appearance, every task that requires you to think and act like palace property, rather than a human being with independent desires, all of these experiences slowly overwrite the psychological structures that once defined you. The process resembles drowning in slow motion. Some days you feel like you're maintaining your grip on who you used to be, successfully performing your assigned role while keeping your real self safely hidden. Other days, the performance becomes so natural that you catch yourself thinking in the voice of Jade Flower rather than remembering through the eyes of the village boy you once were. These moments of identity slippage terrify you more than any physical punishment because they suggest that the palace's ultimate victory, the complete erasure of your original self, may be inevitable rather than merely possible. The most insidious aspect of this identity erosion is how it accelerates during moments of genuine human connection. When Lady Min shares her memories of her grandmother's garden, or when you comfort Autumn Leaves during his nightmares, these acts of compassion feel like victories against the system's dehumanizing machinery. But they also require you to access emotional capacities that belong to your original self. The village boy who once felt empathy naturally rather than as a calculated performance. Each time you reach into those deeper wells of humanity, you risk discovering they've grown shallower. The part of you that once loved freely, dreamed boldly, and felt anger at injustice has been systematically starved by years of enforced submission. Like muscles that atrophy from disuse, your capacity for genuine emotion weakens with every day spent performing contentment with your degraded existence. The palace's genius lies in creating situations where survival requires the voluntary surrender of everything that once made you human. You cannot maintain the rebellious spirit that might sustain hope for escape, because rebellion leads to punishments that break both body and mind. You cannot nurture relationships with other gongbok that might provide emotional support because the administration rotates assignments specifically to prevent the formation of bonds that could challenge institutional loyalty. Most cruelly, you cannot even mourn your losses openly because grief for your stolen manhood and abandoned dreams represents implicit criticism of imperial wisdom. The boy who once ran through mountain meadows must die silently, without ceremony or acknowledgement, while Jade Flower emerges fully formed from his ashes like some grotesque phoenix of palace politics. As your second year of service begins, you witness the arrival of new candidates for transformation. Boys whose terrified faces mirror your own memories of that first night in the compound. Watching them stumble through their initial days of preparation, you feel simultaneously protective and envious. Protective because you understand their suffering in ways that no one else can. Envious because they still possess something you've lost, the clear knowledge of who they used to be. The new boys look to the older gongbok for guidance and comfort, not understanding that survival in the palace requires the systematic abandonment of both. You want to warn them that holding on to hope will only prolong their agony, that accepting their fate completely offers the quickest path to psychological numbness. But you also remember how desperately you once needed to believe that some part of your original self could survive the transformation. One of the new arrivals, a boy of perhaps 10 years old, bears such a striking resemblance to your younger brother that looking at him feels like being stabbed in the chest. His name, his real name, not the flower designation he'll soon receive, is Yongsu, and he comes from a fishing village not far from your own childhood home. When he speaks, his accent carries echoes of your mother tongue that you haven't heard in 2 years. Jongsu asks you questions that you cannot answer honestly without violating palace protocols. Will the surgery hurt as much as the older boys claim? Will he ever see his family again? Is it true that gongbok sometimes die from sadness even after their bodies heal? Each inquiry forces you to choose between offering comfort and maintaining the performance of contentment that keeps you alive. You settle on a middle path that satisfies neither impulse completely. The palace takes care of those who serve faithfully, you tell him, the words tasting like ash in your mouth. Focus on learning your duties rather than dwelling on what cannot be changed. The advice is practical and safe, but it offers no real comfort to a terrified child facing the destruction of everything that defines him. Jongsu's presence becomes a daily reminder of the price you've paid for survival. His gradual transformation from defiant village boy to compliant palace property forces you to relive your own psychological death in excruciating detail. You watch his spirit break during the preparation rituals, see his eyes go empty during recovery from surgery, and witness the birth of another perfectly obedient gongbok where once a living child existed. The parallel process reveals how completely you've adapted to palace expectations. Where once you would have felt rage at the system destroying another innocent life, now you experience primarily relief that Jongsu's transition proceeds smoothly without complications that might disrupt household routines. Your capacity for moral outrage has been so thoroughly suppressed that witnessing fresh atrocities generates only mild concern about potential administrative inconveniences. This emotional numbness extends to your relationships with the royal women you serve. Lady Min's confidences about her imprisoned dreams no longer inspire sympathy so much as professional satisfaction at being trusted with sensitive information. Her tears during private moments register as data about her psychological state rather than expressions of genuine human suffering deserving compassion. The transformation horrifies you when you recognize it clearly, but that recognition comes in brief flashes between long periods of automatized service. Most of the time, you exist in a state of functional unconsciousness, where duties are performed efficiently while your deeper awareness retreats to some protected space beyond the reach of palace corruption. This protective dissociation allows you to endure experiences that might otherwise drive you insane, but it also completes your transformation into exactly what the palace system intended to create: a human-shaped tool that performs complex tasks while possessing no independent will or desire. The village boy who once dreamed of marriage and children has been replaced by an elegant machine designed to enhance the comfort of his royal captors. The final stage of your psychological metamorphosis occurs during your third year of service, when palace administrators promote you to Lady Min's personal attendant, a position that requires unprecedented intimacy with your assigned royal woman. You now help her dress and undress, attend to her most private bodily functions, and sleep on a mat beside her bed to respond to nighttime needs. This elevation represents recognition of your complete reliability, but it also exposes you to aspects of royal women's lives that illuminate the true scope of palace prison systems. Lady Min, you discover, suffers from periods of deep melancholy during which she refuses food for days at a time and speaks only to express wishes for death. Her beauty, celebrated throughout the kingdom, has become a burden that traps her in a role she never chose and can never escape. During these dark episodes, she confides secrets that could topple dynasties if repeated outside her chambers. Affairs between royal women and guards, conspiracies involving foreign ambassadors, and plans for escape attempts that never progress beyond desperate fantasy. Your proximity to such dangerous information tests your conditioning in ways that earlier training never anticipated. The temptation to use your knowledge for personal advantage, perhaps to bargain for freedom or revenge against the system that destroyed you, represents your final opportunity to reclaim some measure of agency. But the attempt would mean certain death not only for yourself, but for Lady Min and everyone else connected to the leaked information. More fundamentally, you realize that even possessing the capacity to contemplate betrayal would require accessing parts of your personality that no longer exist in functional form. The ambitious village boy who might have seized such opportunities died on Dr. Yi's operating table 3 years ago. What remains lacks the psychological equipment necessary for rebellion, having been specifically designed to serve rather than to want. As winter approaches in your 4th year of service, Jongsu, now called Lotus Bud, begins showing signs of the same emotional evolution that has consumed you. His initial terror has given way to mechanical efficiency, his desperate questions about home have ceased, and his interactions with newer arrivals display the same calculated kindness that you now recognize as a symptom of advanced psychological adaptation. Watching Lotus Bud's transformation completes your understanding of the palace's ultimate success. The system doesn't simply create obedient servants, it manufactures willing participants in their own degradation, who then facilitate the degradation of others. Each generation of gongbok becomes accomplices in the corruption of the next, creating a self-perpetuating cycle that requires no external enforcement once properly established. The realization that you have become complicit in the very system that destroyed you should provoke outrage, or at least regret. Instead, it generates only a weary acceptance that feels disturbingly similar to peace. The anger that might have sustained resistance has been so thoroughly drained away that even recognizing your own moral collapse fails to disturb your emotional equilibrium. This absence of feeling represents the palace system's greatest triumph. The creation of victims who no longer suffer because they no longer remember what they've lost. You serve your royal captors with genuine dedication, not because you love them, but because you have forgotten how to want anything else. Your childhood dreams of freedom and family seem as distant and irrelevant as stories about mythical creatures from ancient legends. The boy who once herded goats in mountain meadows exists now only as a faint echo in moments between sleep and waking, when consciousness hasn't yet reassembled itself around the identity of Jade Flower. These glimpses of your former self grow rarer with each passing season, like stars fading as dawn approaches. On a morning in late winter, as you prepare Lady Min's tea with the same precise movements you've performed 1,000 times before, you catch your reflection in her bronze mirror and realize that the face looking back belongs entirely to the palace. The features remain recognizably yours, but the expression, the posture, the very quality of attention, all of these belong to Jade Flower rather than to any village boy who ever existed. The recognition brings neither sorrow nor relief, only the mild satisfaction of a job completed successfully. You have become exactly what the palace required, a perfect servant whose contentment with degradation makes the system appear humane rather than monstrous. Your transformation stands as testimony to the ultimate power of patient, systematic oppression to reshape human nature itself. In the end, the tragedy of Korea's royal boy eunuchs lies not in their suffering, but in how completely that suffering was made to disappear. The palace walls that once echoed with the cries of castrated children eventually fell silent, not because the cruelty ended, but because its victims learned to call their torment service, their mutilation purification, and their destroyed dreams fulfilled destiny. You stand now in those same snow-covered courtyards where your nightmare began, no longer the terrified child who once clutched a jade ornament while preparing to serve tea to his captors. You have become the ornament yourself, beautiful, useful, and utterly incapable of the growth that once defined your humanity. The greatest horror is not that the system broke you, but that it taught you to be grateful for the breaking.